Our face, it's basically our story, right? It's how people know us, how we connect with them. So what happens when that story gets, violently rewritten by some kind of trauma? Today, we're going to dive into the incredible science of putting the pieces back together, specifically when a facial fracture heals the wrong way.
And this really gets to the heart of it. It's a simple quote, but it's so true. Think about it. So much of how we connect with each other, it happens right around our eyes. That's where we see emotion, where we build trust. It's where we really truly see each other.
So, that's the big question, isn't it? Because this is where things get really serious. We're not just talking about a simple broken bone. No, we're talking about a situation where the healing process itself creates a permanent problem. It's like a constant physical reminder of the trauma that locks in a whole bunch of other functional issues.
Okay, so let's get into it. First things first, we're going to be focusing on the cheekbone, or what doctors call the zygomatic complex. And we're looking at what happens when a fracture there becomes malunited. It's a technical sounding term, but all it really means is that the bone healed, but in the wrong spot.
Yeah, malunited just means, badly joined. The broken pieces of the bone have fused together, but they're not lined up correctly. The body's own amazing healing power has accidentally locked the mistake in place. And this is a huge deal because it's not just about how someone looks, not by a long shot. It sets off a whole cascade of other issues.
But here's something that might surprise you. Perfect symmetry? It's a total myth. I mean, even in a perfectly healthy face, your cheekbones can be different by up to 4 millimeters. And that's really important context, right? Because it shows that the goal of this kind of surgery isn't to create some impossible, robotic-looking face. It's all about getting back to a natural harmony. And this is the key part, restoring function.
All right, so let's talk about those consequences. Because a single bone healing just a tiny bit out of place, it can set off this massive chain reaction. We're talking about things that affect everything from how you see the world to whether you can even open your mouth properly.
And wow, the list of what can go wrong it's pretty long and it's serious stuff. These are major functional problems, the kind of things that can just completely change your quality of life day in and day out.
Take diplopia, for instance. That's the medical term for double vision, and it's one of the worst consequences. Can you imagine having to constantly tilt your head at some weird angle just so the world doesn't look like a blurry mess? It's not just annoying, it's a constant, exhausting battle just to see straight. And that right there is why this corrective surgery is so important. Get this, even after the first treatment for the fracture, about 1 in 10 patients are still left with that double vision. It's a problem that often just doesn't go away by itself.
And the why behind the other problems is pretty straightforward, mechanically speaking. If the floor of your eye socket heals wrong and the space gets bigger, your eyeball can actually sink back into your head. Or, if that cheekbone heals just a little bit too low, boom, it can physically get in the way of your jaw, stopping you from opening your mouth all the way.
Okay, so you've got all these potential issues on the table. How does the surgeon decide, yep, we need to operate? It's a huge decision, obviously, and it's not something they just feel is right. It's based on a really clear, measurable set of rules.
You could almost think of it like a pilot's pre-flight checklist. It's a go, no-go list for surgery. They're looking for real, quantifiable problems. We're talking about things you can measure, like asymmetry of more than 5 millimeters, or an eyeball that shifted enough to cause double vision. Maybe it's nerve pain that has stuck around for over a year. The bottom line is, the decision has to be based on hard evidence, not just how a patient feels.
So once the decision is made, it's a go for surgery. The surgeon basically has 2 main ways to tackle the problem. The big choice comes down to this. Do you go in and fix the actual bone structure itself, or do you camouflage the problem?
And this slide really breaks down that strategic choice perfectly. On one hand, you have an osteotomy. Think of that as rebuilding the foundation of a house. The surgeon literally goes in, re-breaks the bone where it healed wrong, and puts it all back in the right place. On the other hand, you have camouflage surgery. That's more like a really good renovation. You leave the wonky foundation as is, but you use implants to fill in the gaps and smooth out the surface. Which way they go depends completely on what the root of the problem is.
Now, osteotomy, re-breaking a bone, it sounds pretty dramatic, right? But it's an incredibly precise procedure. What they're really doing is giving the body a second chance to heal properly. This time, though, the surgeon is there to make sure every single piece lines up exactly where it's supposed to.
And the technology they use to hold it all in place? It's come a long way. I mean, just look at this data. It's incredible. The old school way, using wires, still left about 15% of patients with pretty noticeable asymmetry. But with the modern mini plates they use now, that number drops to zero. Zero. They just hold everything so much more securely, which leads to way, way better results.
Okay, so what about that other approach, the camouflage surgery? This is where we get into the super cool world of material science. I mean, what do you actually use to rebuild parts of someone's face? The answer is this amazing mix of things from nature and some seriously advanced tech.
The list of options is wild. They can use tissue from the patient's own body, like bone or cartilage. They can use tissue from a donor, or they can use a whole bunch of man-made materials. That's what alloplastic means. And then there's the really futuristic stuff, experimental materials that can actually bond with the body's own bone. It's pretty amazing stuff. But here's the thing, there's no single perfect material. Every option has its own pros and cons. Using the patient's own cartilage, for example, is kind of the gold standard because your body isn't going to reject it, but it means you need a whole other surgery just to get it. Silicone is super easy to get in shape, but there's always a small risk of a bad reaction, so for every single patient, it's this careful balancing act between what's ideal and what's practical.
But wow, the results they can get are just incredible. Check out this data from a study on patients who got those cartilage grafts. A whopping 96% of them ended up with a good or acceptable result. Only 4% had a poor outcome. That just goes to show you how effective these techniques really are.
So when you boil it all down, that's what this whole thing is about. It's this amazing blend of mechanics, biology, and honestly, a bit of artistry. The surgeon isn't just fixing the functional stuff like the double vision or the stuck jaw. They're also trying to restore that sense of balance, of harmony, that is so, well, central to who we are.
And that kind of leaves us with this one big final thought. When you think about all the advancements coming down the pipeline, like 3D printing, those bioactive materials we mentioned, super precise surgical planning, the surgeon's toolkit is just getting more and more powerful. So the question for the future isn't just, can we fix it? It's, how close are we to being able to perfectly erase any sign that the trauma even happened in the first place?